Hello, you're most welcome to the course Nutrition in Plants and Animals for Ordinary Level for Ugandan Schools. And that is Ugandan Secondary Schools by me, Caesar Obudra, who has an academic qualification of Bachelor of Science with Education from Moni University. Now, in our first lesson to introduce this course called Nutrition in Plants and Animals, I'll be taking you through the introduction to nutrition. Now, when I talk about introduction to nutrition, there are key objectives that you must be able to keep in your head, such that by the end of the lesson, you should be able to define the term nutrition, give the nutrients needed by plants and animals, explain the importance of nutrition, explain the autotrophic nutrition and heterotrophic nutrition, define photosynthesis, define chemosynthesis, explain parasitism, phagocytosis, saprophytism, symbiosis, holozoic nutrition, and then should be able to explain the characteristics of this holozoic nutrition. And then, lastly but not least, you should be able to tell us what herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores are all about. If you are able to uh, give all those that are outlined in the objective, then you are good to go with the course from just the beginning. Now, what do we mean when we talk about nutrition? By definition, nutrition is the process by which organisms obtain nutrients through taking in food material or making their own food materials to maintain their life processes or metabolic processes. Now, in the definition, you should take note of key things. One is that nutrition is a process in the body of living organisms, and this process is very important in obtaining nutrients, which nutrients are abstracted from the food that we eat. It's not the food that we eat that is being used, or is it is not what we call the nutrients, but rather it is the nutrients that are found in those food nutrients that are being abstracted, and after their abstraction they are used for the metabolic processes of the body. And of course, these food materials are what we call the nutrients, as I had said before. And for plants, the nutrients include water, mineral salts, carbohydrates, and then in animals, they are the carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, vitamins, and also the mineral salts. We'll look at the mineral salts later. I don't want to take time to explain anything about them. Now, why is it important that organisms undertake the process of nutrition? It is important because this process of nutrition provides the living organisms with raw materials that are used for four major purposes. That is, one is growth of cells and tissues. Of course, if an organism is being born very small, that's for in the case of animals, that the organism grows bigger. How does it grow? It grows because the food materials that we eat supplies the nutrients that enables the cells to carry out its metabolic processes, and hence enabling the cells to grow. After the cells have grown, of course, the tissues grow automatically. And then also respiration obtain its raw materials from this process of nutrition, like the glucose, which is being respired upon to produce energy, which energy are used also to run the body processes. And then repair of worn out or damaged tissues, like healing of wounds. I don't know how you who is attending to this lesson will be looking like if there was and is no repair of worn out or damaged tissues in our body. We often get hurt. We often get cut by sharp objects, but after a few days, the wounds heal. It is because we ate food, and the food from the food that we eat, the raw materials that can make up cells are abstracted and then used to repair those damaged tissues. Then also defense against diseases. So you should note that animal animals feed directly on already made food, and on the other side, of course, plants they obtain or make their own food from inorganic raw materials. Those are carbon dioxide and water, which are obtained from the environment. Now, as this feeding occurs, there are modes through which it occurs. There are not more than two. One is the autotrophic nutrition, and then the second is the heterotrophic nutrition. We will pick them one by one and look at them. To begin with, autotrophic nutrition, which is also called self-nourishment. Uh, by definition, it is a mode of nutrition in which organisms synthesize their own organic nutrients from inorganic material, that is carbon dioxide and water, and they use external source of energy. And they are called autotrophs. So, we have already known that term autotrophs, so we shall continue to use it often, so keep it in mind. Autotrophs are these organisms that are able to synthesize their own food using inorganic materials, carbon dioxide and water, and using external source of energy. Now, these autotrophs have the ability, the ability of an organism to synthesize its own food is what we call autotrophism. And since all other organisms depend either directly or indirectly on the autotrophs that make their own food, they are called producers because they make food available or they produce food that can be used by other organisms, including you as a human being. Uh, there are types of autotrophic nutrition, and these types of autotrophic nutrition are being categorized depending on the external source of energy that is being used to carry out or to drive this process. The first is what we call photosynthesis, and for photosynthesis, this time photosynthesis comes from two words: photo, which means light, and synthesis, which is to make. Now, if that is true, then it means because the categorization of these types of nutrition depends on the external source of energy, then for photosynthesis, the external source of energy is the sunlight. Okay, it may not be only sunlight because in the laboratories we're able to supply plants with light even at night, and they're able to carry out the process of photosynthesis. So it is not only sunlight, but of course, to the greatest extent, plants use sunlight to synthesize their own food. So photosynthesis, by definition, is the type of phototrophic nutrition where organisms synthesize their own organic nutrients using sunlight energy. And of course, in organic materials is carbon dioxide, water, and mineral salts. Examples of photosynthetic autotrophs are all green plants, the algae, and photosynthetic bacteria. Then chemosynthesis, on the other side, is different from photosynthesis because to carry out or to drive this process, the energy is obtained by oxidation of various inorganic compounds. We'll deal deeply into it later on. So, by definition, it is a type of autotrophic nutrition where organisms make their own food by the use of energy obtained from specific chemical reactions. And examples are the chemosynthetic bacteria. The second is the heterotrophic nutrition, which is like saying feeding on others, feeding on others. So you feed on others now. You as a human being, you feed on either plants or animals, but you are all organisms, so you're feeding on others. That means you carry out the process of nutrition called heterotrophic nutrition. So, by definition, heterotrophic nutrition is the mode of nutrition whereby organisms obtain their food by feeding on already manufactured organic food compounds. And the organisms that carry out this process are called heterotrophs. And heterotrophs are incapable of making their own food. That is why you cannot make your own food from within your body. You can't. Now, they include all animals, fungi, insecticides, plants. I mean, the insectivorous plants. You know, insectivorous plants are those plants that feed on certain insects. They have a mechanism that they open up their leaves or their flowers, and then the moment an insect drops into it, they close up on them and digest these plants, absorb the nutrients, and that is nutrition, heterotrophically. And of course, the other examples are most bacteria. But there are also several types of heterotrophic nutrition. One is what we call parasitism. In parasitism, by definition, parasitism is a feeding association between two living organisms of different species, in which one organism, called the parasite, obtains nourishment and shelter from the other organism, which is called the host, and the host suffers injury and harm. So when you're defining this term, you should take note of the fact that parasitism occurs between two species. So there's some human beings who call some of their colleagues parasites because maybe these guys depend so much on them, but they don't get anything. But that relationship, whether in terms of it can't be, qualified to be parasitism because one, it is not a feeding relationship. Sometimes this guy money to go and study, or maybe to transport him from some place to another. So it's not a feeding association or relationship. So it can't be qualified to uh, parasitism. Otherwise, examples: tapeworm in the gut of man, where the tapeworm is the parasite, whereas the man is the host. A cow and a tick, where the tick is the parasite because it feeds on the cow's blood, but the cow does not feed on it, and that also the tick also gets hosted, or it gets shelter and sometimes transport. They get transported from the place where the cow is going to where from where the cow is living to where the cow is going. Wherever the cow goes, the tick goes. Last but not least, a bed bag and the man. Similarly, the bed bag feeds on the man's blood, but the man gets nothing in return. We go ahead. The second is phagocytosis. Phagocytosis sometimes is referred to as cell eating. So, you know how you eat. We eat solid food now. So, by definition, phagocytosis is the process of nutrition where simple cells or unicellular organisms engulf solid food particles. Giving examples will make it much more clear in that if the amoeba feeds on the paramecium, you're able to see that paramecium is a living cell which is solid in nature and it is being uh, eaten. Hmm? By this amoeba, which is a one cell thick organism. And the white blood cells are also one cell thick cells. They're not organisms. So they engulf pathogens. Pathogens like bacteria that may cause diseases to the body of the organism in which these white blood cells, especially for human beings, are found. So in that process, that is also called phagocytosis. It is a feeding relationship. Those cells feed because after the digestion of, after engulfing the pathogens get digested, and after the digestion of these pathogens, those nutrients that are found in the pathogen are also absorbed into the cell's content of that white blood cell. That's not yet all. What about saprophytic or saprotrophic nutrition? This is type of heterotrophic nutrition where an organism feeds on the dead decaying matter and thereby afterwards absorbing the solution from this dead decaying matter. Go to the toilet. Examples. Let me give you an example. It makes it much more clearer. If we take the mushrooms, mushrooms normally grow where there are there is some decaying organism. So whenever mushrooms have grown, know that there are dead decaying organic matter in that soil. So they have to grow there because they can feed by absorbing the solution form of those nutrients that are in the decaying, uh, matter. Common brain mold. This common brain mold, the moment you leave bread in, when that bread is not dry, it has some moisture content in it, and also it has okay, it is placed in an environment which is a little bit warm that can support the growth of the fungi. Of course, the common bread mold is also a fungus. uh, you'll be able to see it growing. It's a little bit blackish in color, and it has a lot of mycelium. So they're able to grow there because that bread, if it is containing water and the temperature is a little bit high, it encourages decomposition by other bacteria or other organisms, and then from there, these common bread mold can also germinate. The spores germinate. After the spores have germinated, they grow up. They feed. Come on, if there was no food there, they can't grow there. So that's how they're able to survive there in that environment. Then symbiosis or mutualism. I think this is one of those best heterotrophic modes of nutrition or types of nutrition where the two different species of the organisms both benefit, although they don't benefit equally because only one benefits nutritionally. The other will benefit maybe in terms of shelter and other things. Examples are the lichen. Lichen, try to look around in my compound where I have the north here. My environment is still very new too. You know, so I mean a lot of things have been destroyed on it, so they are not there. But this lichen here normally colonize. Okay, they're the first colonizers of any new habitat. So in the colonization process, like if you go into the rock surfaces, find the lichen. It's made up of the algae, which is a photosynthetic organism, and then the fungi, which is a non-photosynthetic organism, and so they benefit in that relationship in a way that the lichen, I mean the algae, is able to obtain some carbon dioxide and other things from the fungi, but also obtains the water which is being abstracted by these fungi because fungus, they have some areas where water can clog. What about the leguminous plants and the rhizobium bacteria? Leguminous plant may be the beans, and so these beans have root nodules. These root nodules are where the rhizobium bacteria are accommodated. So in this accommodation, the rhizobium bacteria obtains shelter, whereas the leguminous plants, which is if we say the beans, gets nitrogen which is being absorbed by this rhizobium bacteria and is able to use it for its own nutrition. What about the protozoa and the ruminant? The protozoa are found inside the cecum of these ruminant animals, and they have the capability of producing cellulase. Cellulase is an enzyme that can digest cellulose. Plants contain a lot of cellulose on their cell wall, and these cellulose are very strong that they can't easily be digested. Like human beings cannot digest cellulose. So the protozoans digest these cellulose and is able to release glucose out of it, and this glucose is being used by these ruminant animals. But what does the protozoan get? Shelter inside. So it's nice, no? Nice relationship. The white egret and the cow. The white egret bird feeds on the thick that on the skin of the cow. What does the cow get? The removal away of the tick from its skin. What about the white pig? Feeds. Man, and the bacteria in the small intestine. This is according to some of the latest research in human nutrition, where it has been discovered that there are some bacteria that are found in the small intestines of man that can continue to digest proteins. Protein digestion continues in the small intestine because of the presence of this bacteria. So the bacteria gets hosted there, and man is able to get the digestion abilities, benefits of this bacteria inside the small intestine. And then holozoic nutrition, which is the most complex mode of heterotrophic nutrition that you yourself as a human being you also have that. So I want to talk about holozoic nutrition. Is the mode of nutrition whereby the food nutrients are taken into the body and broken down into smaller soluble molecules which can be absorbed and assimilated by the body. What is unique about it is that there is a highly specialized digestive tract through which this food is being taken, digested, absorbed, assimilated, and so on. Okay, we'll look at them soon. So it is commonly found in free living organisms, but the characteristics are what will make it much more clear. So when we talk about holozoic nutrition, you should note that the fastest step in holozoic nutrition is ingestion. This ingestion is the taking in of the complex organic food into the body. Like if you are chewing cassava, that is a complex organic food material because it contains starch, it contains cellulose, those hard things, complex. So if you take it into your gut, which is that or to say highly specialized tract into which the food is taken, then boom, they get digested. Even just from the mouth, if it is the case of eating cassava, the starch gets digested by the enzyme amylase, salivary amylase. So this digestion is what you mean by the breakdown of the complex organic food molecule into smaller diffusible molecules. Smaller diffusible molecules. By diffusible, we mean that the simple or the smaller molecules are able to pass through the semi-permeable membrane or the selectively permeable membrane of the digestive tract that will come and deal into deeply later, but I can I think that's enough here for this basic introductory part of heterotrophic nutrition. So after they are being broken down to smaller diffusible molecules, then they must pass through that semi-permeable membrane by a process called absorption. And when they pass there, they go into the tissue, into the body tissue, like in the blood. Blood is body tissue. So they pass into into the bloodstream where they can then be transported to the rest of the body parts. Like if it is the cassava that you have chewed and it has been digested up to the level of being glucose. Now this glucose is able to enter through the semi-permeable membrane of the small intestine, and then from there they can be transported to the brain with the blood, and then from there the next characteristic comes into play, and that is assimilation. So assimilation is the isolation of absorbed food molecules by the body to provide energy for building up of body tissues. So the glucose which has been absorbed into the body in the bloodstream and is being transported to the brain gets used to build the body tissues. Okay, let me bring it away from the brain and say to your abdomen as a man. You know, man developed some belly which is a little bit big because they accumulate a lot of fats there. Now, the moment the glucose goes there, what your body needs will be used up. But the moment if you had eaten too much of that carbohydrate, the cassava, then the excess of those glucose molecules will be used further to do other things, and that is storage. They will be converted to fats and then stored in the fat globules in your potamus, in your, your abdomen. So the moment they are being stored there, it is still assimilation. But before, if it was not in excess, of course, the glucose will be broken down further using, of course, via chains of reactions. And in those chains of reactions, you'll be able to see energy being produced in the form of ATP, and water is also released, and carbon dioxide, which we now breathe out. Or the best term to use is exhale biologically. We say the carbon dioxide that we exhale. So the energy, which is in the form of ATP, will not be used to run the body processes. Okay, one of the simplest is just heat. You know, if you touch your skin is warm, go and touch a plant. The body of a plant is always colder than yours. So the ATP can be converted into heat and then used to maintain constant body temperature. The enzymes in your body can work very well. After assimilation, in the human beings, you as a human being, after eating cassava, there is a lot of cellulose in there also. So this cellulose is not digested, cannot be digested by your body because you don't have an enzyme called cellulase which can digest it. So it must be ingested, and that is the process called, the process called ingestion, which is one of the characteristics of holozoic nutrition, which is the elimination of the undigested food materials from your body. And that marks the end of the characteristics of Holozoic nutrition. But that's not all. Holozoic feeders are categorized into three major groups. One of these being the carnivores, then the omnivores, and the herbivores. The herbivores, I would like to take it in this way because we should look at the order of feeding. The herbivores, these herbivores, they live or they feed directly entirely on plant vegetation. Take the goats, the cattle, the sheep, they don't eat meat. Feed on only and only plants. Carnivores, only flesh, meat. Take the cow, I mean, take the cat, the dog, the lion, only flesh, only flesh. They like, if it were a human being. So the omnivores are in between. They are both carnivorous and herbivorous, but that's not the best way of saying it. They are omnivores. So they feed on both flesh and plant materials. So with this, we are almost coming to the end of this lesson. But before we halt and wait for the next lesson, I want to say let's remind ourselves with the objectives and see whether what we have learned we're able to remember, whether we're able to define, and so on. So let's look into it. So when we are going to summarize, we should be able to do this following. One is you must by now I expect you to be able to define the term nutrition. After defining that, you should be able to give the nutrients needed by plants and animals, explain the importance of nutrition, explain autotrophic and heterotrophic nutrition, define photosynthesis, define chemosynthesis, explain parasitism, phagocytosis, saprophytism, symbiosis, holozoic nutrition, and then give the characteristics of holozoic nutrition, and then lastly, uh, you should be able to give for us the meaning of these terms: herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores. If you were to do this, my friend, I go give you good marks. I remain Caesar, but catch with you next time soon for the next lesson. That's gonna be lesson 2. Hope you have enjoyed the lesson. Thank you.